I cannot lose you too." For a moment, silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the rhythmic patter of rain. Cleo's heart raced, a whirlwind of emotions twisting within. "And you think standing in the shadows, always waiting to save me, will change that?" Her voice softened, revealing the underlying hurt. "I need you to trust that I can handle myself. You might be a crime boss's brother," she scoffed lightly, "but that doesn't mean I can't carve my own path. Trust." Malik's voice dropped to a near whisper, heavy with unspoken truths. "It's so easy for you to say when I'm the one bearing the weight of my family's legacy. Trust when I know too well how dark the world is willing to become. I can't stand by while you flirt with fate." "You don't know the whole story," she shot back, the heat of her frustration rising. But as those words hung between them, a flicker of vulnerability crossed her face. "You don't see how I fight every day just to prove I'm not just a puppet in this twisted game." The storm raged outside, a tempest mirrored in their hearts, each beat echoing the conflict of their entwined destinies. Malik stepped in even closer, the intensity of his gaze unyielding and magnetic. "You're more than that, Cleo. We're both more than the rules set for us." Cleo felt the air sizzle as he spoke, the distance between them shrinking until she could almost feel the warmth radiating from his body. "But what if I fail?" she whispered. "Then we rise again." His voice was low, filled with a fierce determination that made her heart thud loudly in her chest. Together. The rain continued to wash over the world around them, creating a haze of sound that felt like a cocoon wrapped tightly around their hopes and fears. Cleo, emboldened by Malik's fierce words, dared to take a step closer. The intimacy of the moment consumed them, a silent communion where the unsaid often spoke louder than words. "You do realize," she said, a teasing curl to her lips despite the gravity of their discussion, "the last time someone tried to protect me, I ended up in a far worse situation?" "That's because the last time was just someone," Malik shot back, the ghost of a smile finally breaking through his intensity. "This time, it's me. And I promise I'm a threat to anyone who dares come close." Cleo laughed, the sound bright and lively, cutting through the storm that seemed to close in around them, an affirmation of their resilience. "I suppose that might be worth a little risk, wouldn't you say?" "Risk is all we have left," Malik replied softly, an earnestness glowing in his eyes. "But together, we might just weather this storm." As silence fell once more, Cleo caught the glimmer of hope in his gaze, their worlds interweaving, a tapestry of shared battles and tentative promises. Outside, rain poured down in sheets, but within their small corner of the world, a flicker of warmth ignited. Scene 75, Tests of Faith. The late afternoon sun draped its golden cloak over the sprawling estate of the Orpheus family, seeping through the intricate wrought iron gates and onto the cobblestone path. Cleo Seke stood outside, her heart racing as she faced Malik Orpheus. The air between them, thick with unspoken words, mirrored the heat rising from the pavement beneath their feet. "What do you mean by saying they're coming for you?" Cleo demanded, her voice a hushed growl, laced with disbelief. She pulled her coat tighter around her, almost as if it could shield her from the storm brewing within Malik's eyes. Malik, leaning casually against the stone column of the estate entrance, pinched his brow, a gesture of deep contemplation that gave her pause. "I mean, they aren't just whispers anymore, Cleo. It's a reckoning." His gaze flicked away, clouds of shadow and uncertainty rumbling beneath his composed exterior. She felt the gravity of the moment, the air thickening with tension, compelling her to take a step closer, even as her instincts screamed to retreat. "You can't just keep me in the dark. If I'm being dragged into this mess, I deserve to know what I'm dealing with." Her voice grew stronger, a spark igniting in the pit of her stomach. "Isn't that what you fought for?" Malik replied, a trace of challenge flickering in his eyes. "You wanted to break free, but some chains are heavier than they appear." Cleo's thoughts raced, visions of her past life flashed through her mind. The nights spent drowning in superficiality with her fiancé Marco, laughing at parties while darkness clawed underneath the facade. "This isn't about Marco. I'm done with that life." She clenched her fists, willing her body not to tremble. Silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the distant chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves. Malik's guarded expression softened, his vulnerability surfacing like a fragile bloom, daring to break through winter's frost. What if I told you he's the one who's truly in danger? A weight lingered between them, heavy with implications. Cleo searched Malik's face for more, but instead she resolved her gaze into a steely determination. Then I'll save him. The conviction in her voice seemed to crack the tension, yet an inexplicable tremor lingered beneath. Malik's brow furrowed, and he stepped closer, invading her personal space, the scent of sandalwood and the earthiness of the garden mingling around them, a sharp contrast to the chaos coiling within. Cleo, you don't understand. This isn't just another rivalry. These men play for keeps. His voice dipped, each word a caress tinged with urgency, and her pulse quickened. I've faced worse. She shot back defiantly, though uncertainty gnawed at her resolve. How do you know my limits? Malik chuckled, a low and resonant sound like thunder rumbling in the distance. Believe me, I know more about limits than you can imagine. The heat of his breath danced against her skin as he leaned even closer, their eyes locking with a ferocity that stirred something buried deep within her. A moment stretched, fraught with possibilities. The tension thrummed like an unplayed note, enticing yet perilous. Then let's see how far you're willing to go, he said, his voice dipping into a compelling challenge. It was electrifying, charging the air between them. A sliver of vulnerability flickered behind his bravado, making her wonder how well he knew the darkness that haunted their lives. Is that a dare? She quipped, her heart hammering in her chest. Consider it a test of faith, he replied, an enigmatic smile beginning to form, drawing her deeper into the orbit of his intrigue. Cleo took a steadying breath, grounding herself against the onslaught of emotions swirling around them. Fine. No turning back then. As if drawn together by an unseen force, the space between them collapsed, and a muted pulse echoed through their gazes. A prelude to the chaos that loomed ahead, a realization that they were tethered by more than just threatening shadows. They were intertwined in a fierce contest of determination, ambition, and that intoxicating spark of the unknown. Let's face it together, Malik said, softening his stance, his long fingers brushing against hers, igniting a flicker of warmth that chased the chill of uncertainty away. The weight of his words hung in the air, promising more than a mere alliance. It was a pact sealed in the possible peril of love blossoming amid chaos, as her heart dared to believe, perhaps in spite of everything, she could redefine her fate. Scene 76. The shift of power. The chandelier's crystals hung like suspended stars, refracting the light into shards of luminescence that danced across the polished mahogany of the ballroom floor. Cleo Seke, her auburn gown caressing the floor like a second skin, surveyed the crowd, a glimmering sea of silk and satin, laughter and hushed whispers melding into a symphony of status and ambition. It was her world, yet she felt like a phantom drifting along its fringes, the warmth of her own fire hidden behind a facade of charming indifference. A sharp intake of breath weathered Cleo's thoughts as she focused on Malik Orpheus, standing at the edge of the gathering like a blacksmith's anvil. His frame leaned against the wall, arms elegantly crossed, a guardian in shadows. He watched her as if she were a treasure hidden in plain sight, intrigue dancing in his dark gaze. Cleo could feel the tension coiling between them, a taut line drawn with every lingering glance they exchanged. The scent of freshly polished wood and lilac perfume flooded her senses, grounding her as she pushed through the throng of guests teeming with ambitions of their own. Malik moved closer, breaking the invisible barrier that separated them. His proximity sent an electric thrill rocketing through her veins. Quite the scene, isn't it? Malik murmured, his voice low and rough-hewn like gravel cascading down a mountainside. The corners of his mouth twitched upward, barely hiding a smirk that suggested he was more amused than impressed by the ostentation surrounding them. Cleo huffed softly, glancing away as she smoothed a crease in her gown. It's merely performance art, an elaborate charade for those too blind to see the strings controlling them. Malik's gaze bore into her, searching. And you? Are you not participating? There was a challenge in his words, laced with the heat of an unvoiced secret. Oh, I'm merely an observer, she replied, though the self-assuredness in her voice faltered for a moment. Her heart tapped a staccato rhythm against her ribs, The allure of rebellion simmered just beneath the surface. He stepped closer, the heat of his presence wrapping around her. An observer who just made a significant move within the elite ranks tonight. Cleo shook her head, a teasing glint in her eyes. Strategic maneuvering, dear brother. A necessary art form. Malik studied her, a shadow of concern crossing his features. But have you considered the consequences of your moves? Just then, a nearby clamor erupted, a group of elegantly dressed women gossiping like parakeets, their laughter swaying like a pendulum swinging too far in one direction. Cleo felt the weight of their scrutiny pressing against her, but she stood taller, a pillar of defiance in the face of titillating judgment. I welcome the consequences, she replied firmly, an ember of fire igniting within her. In this game, it's everyone for themselves. Malik leaned in, and their breaths mingled, a shared warmth radiating from that fleeting distance. Is that truly what you want? In that heartbeat, the world around them faded, figures blurred. Conversations became a distant hum, the only clarity existing in the depths of Malik's gaze. What I want, she breathed, a rush of vulnerability washing over her, is to be seen. The admission lingered in the air like a delicate thread pulling them closer. Her heartbeat quickened as Malik's hand brushed lightly against her arm, his fingers lingering, igniting a warmth that crept beneath her skin. Their eyes locked, the barrier of casual jest crumbling into something palpable and fierce. Cleo, he said, drawing her name forth like a spell. You are seen. You've always been more than they know. The air shifted, thick with unspoken truths and electric potential. As the laughter around her faded, Cleo leaned in, the moment suspended in time, until their lips met, a tentative touch that erupted into embers igniting an inferno. His tenderness unraveled her guarded heart, stirring emotions long buried beneath layers of survival and strategy. Her body responded instinctively, molding against him as the ballroom vanished, leaving only the two of them. The kiss deepened, pulses quickening, igniting the tension that had tethered them for so long. The world around them spun out of focus, tilting off its axis, while they danced in a moment forged in fire and longing, of freedom at last relinquished. As they reluctantly pulled apart, breathless, the sound of applause erupted somewhere in the distance, dragging Cleo back to the revelry. Perhaps it's time, Malik said softly, the weight of his words lingering between them, to shift the power. Cleo smiled, the wisdom in his gaze reflecting a shift in her own heart. Perhaps. Scene 77. Clarity in conflict. The midday sun shimmered through the windows of Cleo Seke's modest office, its light catching motes of dust that danced through the air like specters of memory. She stood at the window, holding a drop of ink on her finger, contemplating the stark contrast between the mundane task of signing a document and the tumultuous storm brewing in her heart. Her thoughts swirled with the details of the latest encounter with her fiancé's rivals, the acrimonious whispers that scuttled through the opulent parlors of their society like cockroaches underfoot. Do you think ink will soothe the blood on your hands? Malik Orpheus leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, his gaze scanning her face for the cracks that formed beneath her resolute exterior. Cleo met his eyes, the depths of his dark irises reflecting her internal chaos. I'm not sure it's the ink that brings clarity, Malik. Perhaps it's the conflict. Conflict can be a double-edged sword, he said, stepping closer, each stride deliberate and full of the unresolved tension that had been building between them for weeks. Let's not forget it cuts both ways. Her pulse quickened, a thrill of recognition at the way his tone shifted. This was not merely banter. It was a deeper call to arms against their shared demons. An undeniable electricity crackled in the space between them, the kind that usually propelled them into each other's arms, where secrets lay unspoken yet felt. I can't keep flinching from this, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper as she turned back to the window, seeking solace in the familiar view of the cobblestone street below. I need to confront them, Malik. I need to know the truth. Why is it that truth feels more like a curse than a blessing? He sidled up behind her, the warmth of his body almost tangible against her back. You know the risks. Risks? She scoffed, the edge of frustration slipping into her voice. What do you think I've been doing? She turned suddenly, facing him with a fierce intensity that could have set the curtains on fire. Every time I confront the truth, that I unravel a little more of myself. But not confronting it, that's what will ruin me. Malik's expression softened, a flicker of empathy crossing his features. You're stronger than you know, but it may take you somewhere dark. Somewhere dark could be exactly where I need to go. Her hand reached out as though to steady herself against an unseen wall, but it was Malik's body that supported her weight, strong and unyielding. Just remember, he murmured, lowering his voice so that it came out like a low hum, I'm no saint in this world either. His gaze dropped to her lips, the desire hanging thick and heavy in the air, mixing with the tension. And then, unexpectedly, she felt herself leaning into him, the pull of his presence anchoring her spiraling thoughts. Neither am I, she confided, her breath hitching, the confession spilling like ink from a tipped-over bottle. In that moment, a subtle shift occurred. Their defenses crumbled under the weight of unspoken understanding, exposing vulnerabilities that had festered fearfully beneath their bravado. Malik's fingers brushed against her wrist, igniting sparks that surged through her, and she felt the gravity of connection take hold. Heart racing, Cleo reached for him, her hand circling the nape of his neck, drawing him closer. The scent of cedar and something uniquely him flooded her senses, intoxicating and heady. They were inches apart, every breath charged with an exhilarating tension, and for a breath-stealing moment, the chaos of the world faded, leaving nothing but the space they occupied. And then their lips met, a sweet collision of warmth and longing, a blending of regret and desire. It was an embrace that spoke of stolen moments, of triumph against the odds and sweet promise, tasting of resolve and urgency. But as swiftly as it began, it faded, the gravity of their situation pressing back. Cleo drew away, a flustered gasp escaping her lips, cheeks flushed color blooming like petals in spring. Malik, she breathed, the word hanging in the air like a fragile thread. We can't. Can't what? Be honest with each other? His voice held a teasing lilt, though his eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her pulse race. She looked away, wrestling with conflicting emotions, but deep inside, clarity began to coalesce. You know that we're standing on a precipice, right? Yes, and I'm not afraid to leap, he said, determination edging his tone. But you have to choose if you want to fly or fall. The weight of his words hung between them, twisting in the space that thrummed with possibilities and uncharted territory. Scene 78, The Dark Side of Ambition. The dimly lit drawing room of Cleo's family estate lay coated in shadows, murmurs of the evening ballroom just beyond the heavy velvet curtains. Gold-framed portraits of her ancestors looked down, their expressions imbued with silence that filled the air, heavy with expectation and unspoken conflicts. Cleo stood by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting oscillating patterns across her face, dancing in her dark eyes that reflected the tumult of her heart. As the warmth enveloped her body, her mind revisited the day's events. A letter from her fiancé lay open and abandoned on the polished mahogany table, its contents circling like vultures around her ambitions, a simple dismissal of her dreams smothered under a weight of indifference. With a sigh that echoed her frustration, Cleo pivoted, her thoughts colliding. The crouched shadows in the corners seemed to whisper lies, sowing doubt into her resolve. It was in that moment Malik appeared, tall and poised, moving like the soundless night itself, his presence immediate and magnetic. "Forgive me if I've interrupted your reverie," he said, his voice low and soothing, lilting above the shuffle of feet outside. He entered the room fully, closing the distance with an effortless grace that reflected every abrupt shift in her heartbeat. Cleo turned to face him, her chin set defiantly, but the spark of vulnerability flickered in the depth of her gaze. "You know how they feel about ambition, Malik, about me." Malik's thunderous silence thundered louder than any words. He approached the mantel, leaning slightly closer, resisting the urge to bridge the gap. Ambition isn't a flaw, it's a beacon. They are merely frightened by what they cannot understand. The way he spoke, each word caressed as though precious, drew her nearer, weaving a tapestry of unvoiced desire that tinged the atmosphere between them. Cleo took a step forward, emboldened. And yet, they would extinguish that beacon if it flickered too brightly. They want me to believe their fears are mine. Malik's brow furrowed slightly, conflicting emotions etched into his features as he snatched the letter from the table. The sheer rawness of the moment sent a shiver coursing through Cleo. "This is them trying to dictate who you should be," he hissed, the paper crinkling between his fingers. "They don't know you." The unyielding connection sparkled in the charged air, a magnetic pull that left both breathless. In one smooth motion, Malik smoothed the letter against the table, his voice now a soft caress. "You're not their shadow, Cleo. You never were." The intimacy of his words swept over her, enticing and intoxicating. Cleo leaned into the warmth of his presence, her heart racing as their eyes locked, sending the world around them into a fragmented blur. What if I fail? What if I'm too ambitious? Or not ambitious enough? "Then you'll fail spectacularly," he teased gently, the corner of his mouth lifting with warmth that disarmed her worries. "And yet, you'll rise. You always do." With that whispered challenge, the silence enveloped them, thicker than smoke, heavy with possibilities, as if time stood still. Malik stepped closer, the space between them shrinking until breath mingled. "Your ambition is your strength," he murmured, his dark eyes flickering with molten allure. Cleo could feel her heartbeat echoing in her ears as he reached out, fingers brushing her arm, igniting a trail of heated sparks that sent her spirit soaring. In this moment of precarious balance, she felt weightless, an ember waiting to catch flame. "I need you," she whispered, a confession born out of the desperation of the night. Malik's response was immediate, lowering his head, their lips nearly touching, their breath sinking in shared anticipation. "And I will always fight for you." Their lips finally met, softly at first, a tentative connection marred by uncertainty and haunted secrets. But as the kiss deepened, it morphed, it solidified, a confluence of aspiration and collision, the world outside dissipating into the background. Air crackled, drowning in longing and unyielding resolve. In that stolen moment, the shadows of her doubts faded, eclipsed by the intensity of their shared resolve and unspoken aspirations. And when they finally pulled apart, Cleo found herself gasping, breathless, the fireplace's low glow reflecting the exhilaration of untamed ambition and newfound devotion. Yet an unarticulated tension lingered around them, hinting at the dark forces lurking in the shadows. "Never forget that you deserve all that you fight for," he breathed, the intensity of his gaze sealing their shared oath against the chaos looming on the horizon. Scene 79. The Garden of Trust. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting warm golden hues across the sprawling garden of Cleo's family estate. The vibrant colors of blooming flowers created a striking contrast against the sharp lines of the marble fountain, where water danced and shimmered, inviting laughter and whispers like a secret lover. It was in this haven shrouded from the prying eyes of societal norms that Cleo and Malik found solace amidst their turbulent lives. Cleo stood next to a patch of hydrangeas, their intricate blossoms whispering delicate secrets of change and rebirth. She wore a light summer dress that danced about her legs with each gentle breeze, and for a moment she felt as if she floated above the soil, untethered. "What do you think would happen if we planted a lilac here?" she mused, tilting her head, envisioning the soft purples staking a claim among their more classical neighbors. Malik, sitting on the edge of the fountain, watched her with a smirk, his dark, expressive eyes catching the last rays of sunlight. "A lilac? Think of the scandal, Cleo. Imagine the day you're seen with a flower that doesn't adhere to tradition. The audacity." His tone was teasing, but his gaze held a depth that suggested he understood the constraints she faced more than anyone else. She turned to him sharply, a laugh escaping her lips that felt surprisingly light. "Scandalous, you say? I'll have to explore the depths of social rebellion." As she leaned toward him, the scent of jasmine from a nearby bush wafted through the air, an intoxicating promise of summer warmth. Malik chuckled, but there was an undercurrent of seriousness in his voice. "In this garden, we can be whoever we want. No rules, just you and me." There it was, his insistence on freedom, layered with vulnerability, like the petals on a rose. The shifting dynamic between them made her heart race. Cleo wrapped her fingers around a nearby flower, feeling the rough texture of its stem, grounding herself. "What about you, Malik? Would you risk it all for something so—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Wild." "Every day I do," he replied, a shadow sweeping across his face. His smile vanished, revealing the weight of secrets buried beneath surface laughter. Some risks are worth taking. He slipped his hands behind him, leaning back, weightless yet anchored in a vulnerability that surprised her. Cleo took a step closer, the distance collapsing between them. And what if you fall? The question hung in the air, heavy with potential. Falling is part of the process. If it means reaching something beautiful, then yes, I'd risk it. His eyes pierced through the twilight, exposing a flicker of truth she had never been privy to. She now saw more of the man behind the charming facade, deeper layers glimmering like the stars beginning to twinkle overhead. "Let's plant the lilac, then," she said, her voice a whisper of resolve. "Let's create something together." Their hands brushed against each other as they crouched beside the chosen spot, the sensation sparking male warmth against her delicate skin. Malik's touch was tentative, as if afraid to break the spell cast by the evening glow. Together, they excavated the earth, the soil cool and fragrant with life. Each caress of their fingers stirred things long buried, emotions spilling forth. "Do you remember the first night we met?" Malik asked, pushing aside memories with a flick of his wrist, mud caking his hands. "The gala where whispers of criminality intertwined with dance?" Cleo nodded, flinging a mound of dirt with abandon, her laughter ringing like bells in the fading light. "I thought you were a rogue." "I still am," he grinned, mischief sparking in his eyes. "A handsome rogue to my own tale of intrigue." The air crackled with the tension of what could be, and as they planted the lilac together, their smiles faded into an electric silence. In this moment of intimacy, surrounded by riotous color and the light scent of blooming flowers, the weight of their shared hearts threatened to spill over. Cleo turned toward Malik, her breath hitching as she absorbed the earnestness in his gaze. "Malik," she whispered, the softness of his name unfurling between them. "I." But before she could finish, the sound of gunfire sliced through the tranquility, echoes reverberating across the garden. The moment shattered, replaced by the hurried retreat of normalcy, driven out by the urgency of chaos. Malik sprang to his feet, instinctive and powerful, positioning himself between her and the potential threat as adrenaline surged through him. "Stay close!" he shouted, his voice a low growl, filled with command. And in that electrifying moment, Cleo felt a fierce connection, a depth of trust swirling between the danger and the dark beauty of the man standing before her. The lilac remained unplanted, but their hearts had begun to bloom. "Together," she whispered, drawing closer, their breaths mingling, trust feeding the urgency of the unknown night ahead. Neither the chaos nor the past could sever the taut thread that now tied them together. Together they faced whatever darkness lurked beyond the garden of trust. Scene 80. Echoes of the past. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across the room, illuminating the rich mahogany furniture and the delicate lace curtains that fluttered slightly with the evening breeze. Cleo leaned against the window pane, her fingers trailing along the glass, the chill contrasting sharply with the warmth of the room. She turned to Jonathan, whose gaze lingered on her with an intensity that made the air grow thick. "Do you really think people can ever change?" Cleo asked, her voice barely above a whisper. There was an edge to her question, as if it carried the weight of unspoken fears. Jonathan stepped closer, drawing in a breath, the scent of sandalwood from the fireplace filling his lungs. His brow knitted together, revealing his apprehension. "I'd like to believe they can, but old habits die hard," he replied, his deep voice resonating in the quiet space. Cleo's mind raced, memories flooding in, both joyous and painful. She clenched her jaw, the muscles tingling with tension. What if you've built your entire life around a fantasy of who someone might be, only to find they're everything you feared? Jonathan moved again, his posture no longer casual. It became charged, as if he were pivoting to face the storm brewing within her. "Sometimes we have to risk being wrong." He paused, eyes softening, and the momentary softness of his lips hinted at something more between them. "Cleo, you're not just strong, you're also human." Her breath hitched, warmth creeping up her cheeks. This was not the first conversation steeped in ambiguity and tension, yet tonight, something felt different. His honesty was a balm on her frayed nerves, stirring echoes of a desire she dared not acknowledge. She drew closer, now just a heartbeat apart. "What if I don't want to be wrong?" She challenged softly, her gaze falling to the floor as if the carpet held answers. What if I'd rather hide behind the facades? Jonathan's fingers brushed against her arm, sending a ripple of warmth through her body. Hiding won't protect you, Cleo. Not after everything you've faced, he said, his voice low, filled with urgency and a hint of despair. The sincerity of his words wrapped around them like a thread, weaving something vital. Cleo took a breath, inhaling the warmth of his presence, the faint hint of his cologne, a mix of musk and cedar, pulling her closer still. She searched his eyes, desperate for the kind of assurance one could only find in the depths of a stormy sea. But if I let my defenses down, what happens if I drown? The corners of Jonathan's mouth turned up ever so slightly, a teasing flicker amid the seriousness of their exchanges. Better to drown with someone who knows how to swim, he answered, an undertow of warmth beneath his words. In that charged space, Cleo's heart raced. A swell of emotion throbbed in her chest. She hadn't intended to provoke this unguarded exchange, yet here they stood, two souls caught in a tempest of unspoken attraction and shared vulnerability. Their shared past loomed over them like a dark cloud threatening to burst, unrelenting. If you think I'm the person who can save you, Jonathan's voice deepened, you have more faith in me than I do in myself. She lifted her gaze, meeting his fiery determination with hesitant resolve. Faith feels like a gamble, she said, a quiet challenge lingering in her words, her heart caught between fear and yearning. Jonathan's expression broke into something more resolute as he took her hand, the warmth of his fingers wrapping around hers like a promise, steadfast and unwavering. I'll stand with you, no matter what. You don't have to carry this alone. The weight of his words hung in the air, charged with sincerity. Cleo felt the pull of his proximity, the tantalizing closeness that dared her to dream, to hope. Slowly, Jonathan's thumb caressed her knuckles, a gentle motion that ignited a spark in the depths of her being. Just one chance, Cleo. Please. His plea fell softly, but it struck her like a beacon, illuminating the darkness inside. She hesitated, 1,000 unspoken words dancing in her mind. But as his gaze locked onto hers, raw and electric, everything else faded away. She leaned in, heart thundering, and pressed her lips against his, soft yet insistent. A seismic shift ignited between them, the kiss deepening as the world outside melted into nothingness. As they finally broke apart, breathless and dazed, the weight of their past lingered, yet hope flickered in the shadows, whispering of new beginnings. In that moment, amid their shared truths, they began to carve out a new reality bound by their willingness to face the echoes of their past together. Perhaps we can create a different kind of story, Cleo mused, a smile creeping into her expression, filled with the sweet knowledge of possibility. Scene 81. Dreams in motion. In the softly lit parlor of the Orpheus mansion, afternoon light filtered through the grand windows, casting warm patterns across the rich, deep mahogany furniture. Cleo Seke stood by the mantelpiece, her fingers lightly tracing the ornate carvings as if seeking something tangible to anchor her thoughts. The atmosphere pulsed with unvoiced tension, an electric current surging between her and Malik Orpheus, who lounged casually at the edge of a plush chaise. His brow furrowed, lips drawn tight, he regarded her with an intensity that made her pulse race. What if we could change everything? Cleo posed, her chin lifted defiantly, a spark in her eyes. Her voice, steady yet laced with possibility, cut through the simmering silence. She held his gaze, willing him to understand the fervor behind her words. Malik shifted slightly, his broad shoulders relaxing as he absorbed her declaration. Cleo, changing things isn't as simple as a mere wish. Isn't it? Cleo challenged, her jaw set, clenching in that familiar way when she felt something pressing beneath the surface. We're caught in this whirlwind of expectations. I refuse to let my life be determined by others' whims or my own fears. A moment hung between them, heavy with anticipation. Malik straightened, his eyes darkening with unspoken thoughts. You know it's not just about you. There are repercussions, real stakes. Cleo stepped closer, heart racing as she edged toward the warmth of his presence. Those stakes are only tangible if we choose to believe they redefine us. I'm ready to reclaim my narrative, her voice softened, a lingering undertone of vulnerability breaking through her fierce exterior. Together, we can forge a path that aligns with who we truly are. Malik's expression wavered as if she'd struck a chord. He inhaled sharply, leaning forward slightly. And what do you see when you picture that future? Freedom, she responded, the word heavy yet exhilarating. She could almost taste the possibility, sweet and rich like honey brushed across her tongue. The chance to explore my passions without the suffocating weight of my current engagement. A life filled with art and laughter, unfiltered joy. His eyes shone, piercing her with an intensity that stirred something deep within her. She noted the way his muscles tensed, a visible longing flickering across his features. "There's so much beauty in your dreams, Cleo," he murmured, voice low, enveloping. "But what if? What if it all crashes down?" She interrupted, a defiance building in her chest, igniting her spirit. "What if we never take the leap? I choose to dream. I choose to pursue my heart, even in a world that begs me to play it safe." As she spoke, the air thickened with seductive tension, the flickering candle flames dancing in rhythm to the unspoken desires buzzing like a distant melody. Malik's gaze softened, mere inches from her. A silent struggle played out across his features. "You're fierce, a warrior in your own right," he admitted, emotion spilling through his voice like lapping waves against the shore. "But passion alone." His words hung in the air, laden with the weight of what was unsaid. Cleo caught a flicker of frustration, his hands clenched tightly together, as if holding on to something that threatened to escape. She stepped closer, the world fading around them. "You're afraid, Malik, afraid of losing control. But I need you. We need each other. I want to protect you," he almost whispered, and the vulnerability in his voice sent shivers down her spine. With a hesitation that felt achingly alive, she reached out, brushing her fingertips against his hand. "Your protection shouldn't be about locking me away. It should be about standing beside me on this journey. Will you do that?" He turned his palm upward instinctively, as if wanting to embrace her boldness. "I have always stood beside you, even in shadows," he replied, but there was a hint of something unfulfilled simmering beneath the surface. Cleo saw it, yearning intertwined with fear, dark secrets silently tugging at the corners of his mind. The world buzzed around them, sounds of laughter and chatter floating through the air, yet they inhabited another realm, one charged with quiet promises and possibilities. "And as we move forward," she said, gripping his hand more firmly, a lifeline tethering them amidst the chaos, "let's do it together. We'll forge our own path." Malik's gaze breached hers, emotions rippling through the air, raw and compelling. "Together," he echoed, a hint of resolve intertwining with uncertainty as their hearts beat like drums, undeniably in sync. In that moment, as reality pressed down outside those walls, Cleo felt waves of hope swell within her. A dawning realization that together, they could rewrite their destinies, bound by dreams in motion. Scene 82. Bridging Connections. The chandelier above the grand hall sparkled like a cascade of stars suspended in time, illuminating the faces of society's elite. The heady scent of jasmine and anise wafted through the air as attendees basked in the glow of crystal flutes filled with the finest champagne. Cleo Seke stood at the edge of the gathering, her heart racing beneath the delicate layers of her indigo gown. She watched elegant couples spin across the polished marble floor, laughter spilling forth in waves, each peal a reminder of the joyous life she felt slipping through her fingers. As she tugged at her sleeves, searching for comfort in an unfamiliar fabric, she felt his presence before she saw him. Malik Orpheus entered the hall with ease, his long, lean figure moving seamlessly among the crowd, eyes sweeping over the room. His black coat hugged his shoulders perfectly, emphasizing the strength behind his graceful movements. Yet, beneath the confident facade, Cleo sensed a storm brewing. Malik approached her, his expression neutral, but Cleo could see the slight tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched at his sides. "Cleo," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the din, compelling her attention. "You look like you're contemplating a rather dangerous undertaking." The corners of Cleo's mouth twitched upward, but the smile was laced with uncertainty. "Perhaps I am, Malik. After all, every hero needs a villain to challenge." She turned her gaze back to the dance floor, her heart thumping in time with the distant music as she struggled with the weight of her own choices. "We're already caught in a web of chaos, are we not?" Malik countered, positioning himself closer, the air between them crackling with unspoken words. "It feels like a masquerade," she replied, her voice low. Everyone here dances so beautifully, yet they hide the truth behind their masks. Ah, he interjected, his dark eyes locking onto hers. What if the truth is that they're simply waiting for someone to break the illusion? Cleo met his gaze, a spark igniting something deep within her. She could sense the challenge in his tone, escalating a tension that sizzled like summer heat. And who might that someone be? She teased, bravado spilling from her like nectar. Perhaps it should be you. His response hung in the air, thick with challenge and a hint of longing. Malik reached for her hand, his fingertips brushing against her skin, sending an electric thrill coursing through her. What if we forged our own path? He suggested, his voice just above a whisper now, everything around them fading into a blurred backdrop. Cleo's insides twisted at the implication. The surrounding gaiety dulled in contrast to the intensity of his gaze, where shadows danced, obscuring the truth she thought she knew. It would mean risking everything, Malik. Sometimes, he replied slowly, the greatest treasures lie in the risks we dare to take. Her breath hitched as she processed his words, weighing them against her engagement's suffocating grip. Without realizing it, she leaned closer, barely breathing. The moment felt frail, as if the world might collapse around them if one of them blinked. Cleo, Malik said, unfurling his fingers as if inviting her into a world of possibility. You deserve to be more than someone's shadow. If you want to step into the light, I'll be there beside you. And then, with the festive ambiance cascading around them, he moved in closer, the warmth of his body wrapping around her like a protective aura. Their breath mingled, and Cleo felt a powerful longing deep in her core. Her resolve wavered, the fight in her fading as a tide of undeniable attraction washed over her. Just as their lips hovered close, caught in an intimate pause, a commotion erupted nearby. Voices rose sharply, laughter twisted into rage as two men grappled the grand staircase, brandishing accusations that echoed through the hall. Cleo jerked her head away, breaking the moment. Seems we're not the only ones playing games, she remarked, the fragile intimacy shattered. Malik's gaze followed the disturbance, tension threading between them once more. You may have to choose, Cleo, the masquerade or risking the truth. A determined breath escaped her as Cleo stood taller, recognizing an uncertain yet palpable strength igniting within her. Let's see how deep this web goes, she replied, a glimmer of defiance in her eyes. With that, they began to navigate the chaos, each step bridging the gap between their old selves and the exhilarating uncertainty ahead. Scene 83. Facing old foes. Cleo stood behind the counter of her art gallery, a space filled with vibrant colors and bustling energy. Yet today, an oppressive silence hovered. The faint scent of linseed oil mingled with the crisp, musty pages of ancient books lining a corner shelf. She meticulously arranged a display of new pieces, each brushstroke reflecting the turmoil swirling within her. She filled the room with a sense of purpose, her movements purposeful yet graceful. As she arranged the artwork, her eyes flicked up toward the door as it swung open with a jarring creak. Her mother, Cleo Seke, entered with an air of disapproval, followed by three other women, Cleo's old friends turned naysayers, their judgments palpable, their whispers rife with scorn. Ah, the queen of frivolity graces us, Margot announced, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Are you really wasting time on art, dear? I'd expect something grander from the fiancée of the heir to the Hartwell fortune. I prefer it to scheming at the ballroom, Mother, Cleo shot back, her voice steady though her heart raced. The warmth of past hurt flickered in her chest, nudging her toward self-doubt. Malik, leaning against a wall, observed from the shadows, the dichotomy of their worlds stark on his face. He had not intended to intrude, but sensed her need for strength. His intense gaze was anchored, unwavering, and somehow it grounded her. Cleo, one of her old friends, Yasmin, chimed, a disapproving glance evident. What kind of bride are you if you squander your days like this? The gravity of the moment pressed in, and Cleo paused, contemplating her retort. A bride preparing for a future where I can choose my own path, she replied, letting her confident voice rise above the clamor of self-doubt encircling her. The silence that followed was thick. Margot glanced between her daughter and the eminently more appealing artwork, her face a mixture of bitterness and regret. You act as if these childish pursuits matter, she snapped, while your future crumbles. Have you forgotten who you are? I'm choosing to remember who I want to be, she countered, her voice growing stronger, echoing against the bright walls of the gallery. The paintings themselves seemed to lean in, urging her on. A rippling tension formed in the room, everyone on edge as if a storm were brewing on the horizon. It was Yasmin who sneered next, crossing her arms defensively. This isn't the Cleo we all wanted. Are you truly going to throw away your future for, what? Some paintings? Cleo felt Malik's presence settle closer, the warmth of his body casting a protective shadow enveloping her. She could almost feel his heartbeat synchronizing with her quickening pulse. Art isn't frivolous. It's life, it's meaning, Cleo said, eyes flicking to Malik, who met her gaze with fervent intensity. And it's about time I nurture what nurtures me. She took a breath, steadied by the realization that she stood surrounded by individuals unwilling to grant her the respect she deserved. Margot, clearly unamused, stepped forward, her voice dropping to a hiss. How long until this little revolt gets you to a place where no respectable man will look at you? Malik pushed himself off the wall, his voice low yet resonating like a taut string about to snap. You shouldn't dismiss her desires so easily. The others turned to face him, curiosity mingling with skepticism. Cleo is more than a bride-to-be. She's a force of nature. Who do you think you are to interject? One of her friends retorted, the air growing starker with every second. Someone whose sole goal is to protect her, Malik replied, his tone befitting the deep waters of danger and intimacy that tethered them. The tension became tangible, humming between them, mixing bravado with something gentler. Cleo felt courage swell in her chest. She stepped forward into the space filled with judgment, daring to confront not just her past, but her fragmented aspirations. Because I'm standing here right now, Cleo began, glancing around at the women and her mother, and I refuse to diminish my worth to fit inside your expectations. Her voice rang with defiance, a bold proclamation weighed down by the histories shared and now shattered. A collective intake of breath surrounded them, and with it, the fragments of doubt began to reform into something unbreakable. She met Malik's gaze once more, her heart racing not with fear, but with fierce resolve. Let me create my own tapestry. If you can't accept that, she continued, her chin high, perhaps it's time I stopped concerning myself with your opinions. As her old friends exchanged flustered glances, Cleo could feel the weight lift, if only slightly. Malik stood by her side, a tempest of loyalty at her back, a protective shield in a world that demanded obedience. Old foes, new battles, and this time she was ready. Scene 84, a chase for truth. The Southampton rain pelted the cobblestones like a drum roll, the scent of wet earth and distant smoke curling through the frigid air. Cleo Seke stood beneath a faded awning, her heart racing as she watched people scurry by, their colorful umbrellas a blur against the monochrome backdrop of the storm. The relentless patter matched the frenetic thumping in her chest, mirroring her swirling thoughts and mounting anxiety. Cleo, Malik's voice sliced through the cacophony as he emerged from the shadows, breathless and slightly drenched. He brushed a stray lock of hair from his face, his stormy eyes reflecting a tempest of emotions. You shouldn't be out here alone. The tension crackled between them like the electricity before a storm. Cleo straightened, tilting her chin defiantly. I have to find out the truth. The whispers are too loud to ignore. Malik's brow furrowed, concern darkening his features. What whispers? You're playing with fire, Cleo. If anyone discovers. I'm tired of secrets. She snapped, the frustration pouring out of her. I need to confront this for myself, for us. Her words hung in the wet air, heavy with significance. As the rain intensified, Malik stepped closer, his presence a fortress against the world's chaos. There are safer ways. We can. Can we? Or will you just keep dodging the truth like you always do? Cleo interrupted, her eyes glinting with a challenge. The memories of their shared pain hovered between them, unsaid but deeply felt. Malik took a breath, grounding himself as he pinched the bridge of his nose. I don't want to lose you to this. Vendetta. You rush in without thinking of the consequences. Cleo's sharp laugh echoed against the damp street. And you think I can just stand still while my life caves around me? It's not just about you and your protective instincts, Malik. This is bigger than us. He stepped back, colliding with the wall of a nearby shop, an accidental barrier reinforcing their distance. You don't understand the stakes. What you're facing isn't a mere argument or confrontation. This is dangerous. With a flash of defiance, she raised an eyebrow, her voice low and deliberate. When is anything about you not dangerous? Malik's gaze darkened with a hint of realization, as if a distant memory of loss surged forward, feeding the tension that pulsed between them. Don't tempt fate, Cleo. The last time we drifted into this territory, it destroyed us. A silence fell, laden with shared memories, their pain, betrayal, and unspoken connection. He edged closer again, his body radiating warmth amidst the cold deluge. What if this time we find a way out together? His murmur slid through the air, filled with unvoiced emotions urging her closer. Cleo stood before him, uncertainty dancing in her hazel eyes. The rush of desire collided with the weight of her resolve. This isn't just us. If we're going to wade through this dark water, we need to keep our heads above it, not only for ourselves but for those around us. Malik implemented silence, the tension coiling tighter, a reflection of their turbulent world. Each drop cascading from the awning seemed to punctuate their thoughts. The shouts and laughter of passers-by dulled, blending with the thunder echoing away above. Then show me where we begin, he finally breathed, pulling her closer, seeking not just her proximity but her certainty. Where do we find the truth in this mess? With a sharp intake of breath, Cleo nodded, a determination igniting behind her eyes. There's a ball tonight at Lord Heisenberg's estate, a cover for a meeting of the underground. If we don't go, we lose everything. Malik's expression hardened, a grunt escaping as he calculated the risks. And the danger? Only if we're caught, she replied, her voice suddenly hushed. But it's an opportunity we can't waste.